with artificial intelligence and its role in the race for president. Specifically, what impact deep fakes or fake images and videos are having on voters. For that, we spoke with tech ethicist and AI ethics consultant Reid Blackman, who we first met last year at the Artificial Intelligence Conference AI4. When we had you on the show around this same time last year, we asked you to explain to our viewers what deep fakes are. Fast forward a year, how would you characterize the level of knowledge that the public now has about deep fakes?
I'd say they probably don't use the term deep fake a lot, but I'm sure they're more familiar than they were a year ago about the presence of fake videos. The extent to which they can identify when a video is fake, though, that's a separate question.
Well, let's take up that question because we asked you that a year ago. How able are Americans at this moment to decipher between what's real and what's fake? You said, not really.
I don't think that they are any better at it. In their defense, the videos are getting better, except when the content is really outlandish. I do think that there's some degree of growing skepticism such that people need to, they've come to now ask, hey, is this real or is this AI? So I think that kind of question, is this real or AI? That's probably increased in frequency among the general population. But for the most part, I don't think people have a good grip on it.
Talk about some of the examples that have stood out to you in this last year where AI has been used to give out false information.
I don't think that there's been a sort of, let's say Cambridge Analytica style deepfake situation. The problem is not, I don't think there's going to be this deepfake that goes viral, that has this massive influence, that changes the election. I don't think that's the way it really works. It's more the aggregate of disinformation. It's constant feed of fake news, disinformation, misinformation that I think will cause the change. So, I don't think that we should be looking out for the avalanche that just destroys everything. I think it's more erosion that takes place over days, months, years, as opposed to the big traumatic event.
So this continued exposure to false information.
Yeah, it's eroding the information environment. It's making the environment such that we can't increasingly trust what we see, know whether it's true, know where it's coming from. That's the larger problem, as opposed to, again, the big video. I don't think most people are going to see some video of, let's say, Kamala Harris doing something inappropriate or saying something inappropriate or something along those lines and say, well, that's it. I'm not going to vote for her now. I don't think that's the real problem. It's more a constant drip of fake news that gives a feeling or an aura of something's not right about this person. That's going to lead to more influence than the traumatic, oh my God, look at this fake video.
Will you also explain what role emotion plays in all of this?
Yeah, so there's this growing thought that what we need to do is we need to watermark the deep fakes so that people know they're looking at something fake. I don't think that's not a silver bullet. And one reason is because what we're talking about here is emotional reactions to the videos. The videos don't need to get you to believe something new. Right? I don't have to believe that Kamala Harris said that thing or something along those lines. If I feel unease now, or if I feel just, I don't think that's true, but I see where it's coming from, kind of. It's not sort of hitting me at the belief level. It's hitting me at the emotion level. And a lot of our decisions are emotionally driven. Do I want to have a beer with that guy? That was a famous thing around George Bush's time. This guy, the kind of guy you want to have a beer with, and that's why I'm going to vote for him. So it might not be the case that the deep fakes influence our beliefs directly. It might be first that they cause us to have a certain emotion, especially emotions of, say, disgust, contempt, or just discomfort. And that drives the formation of beliefs or behavior down the road.
So even if someone looks at it, knows that it's not real, but has an emotional reaction to it, there could be consequences.
Yeah, think about me. We already know that fiction can generate large emotional responses. Right? You watch fictional movies all the time. You read fictional books, and you have big you cry, you laugh, on all those things. And the same thing is true if we watch deep fakes. We know that it's fake, just like we know that the movie is fake, that the person didn't really die, but we have that emotional reaction. And then there's this complicated psychological issue about whether we can sufficiently isolate those emotional reactions to our more rational reactions and reflections when thinking about, say, who should we vote for? And there's good reason to think that these systems, we can't isolate in that way. We can't just sort of put that to the side and be rational, that those emotions, even despite our efforts, might affect how we deliberate and how we think.
Remind me the example that we talked about of AI last year. It involved the Pope, and it was an image of him wearing...
it was a Balenciaga, a white puffer coat. Yeah.
Okay. Well, fast forward, and we have just about a week or a couple weeks ago, the Kamala Harris audio that is put over some video of her. Will you explain what that looked like, what it sounded like, how realistic do you think it was? And this was something that was retweeted by Elon Musk.
Yeah.
Did not acknowledge that it was a parody until, I believe, a couple days later.
Yeah. Well, one question is whether it was a parody or whether it was really meant to do some undermining. So there's a question about what's the intent with which the video was created. But the video was Kamala saying, I believe it was, to the extent that I saw clips of it, I couldn't even find the original video.
Right, because that's an ethical question too, as news organizations.
Yes,
do we replay what has been fabricated?
Right. I looked at several news organizations and how they covered it, and they all, excuse me, none of them showed the whole video. They showed small clips. They put giant letters over it that said, "This is AI generated." So anyway, it was Kamala's voice saying things like, "I'm a DEI hire, Biden's senile, I'm not prepared, but hire me, vote for me anyway." So, and it was that with the image was not her speaking, that, if I recall correctly from what I've seen, it was images, her at on the campaign trail. And
it was a voiceover.
Exactly, it was a voiceover, yeah.
AI generated.
Yeah. So, that's what happened. It's hard to say if anyone believed it. If you looked at some of the comments that the news organizations covered, some people said, is this real? Is this AI? So again, this is speaking to people's increased ability to ask that question, to think to ask that question, to have the wherewithal to ask that question. But, again, I don't think that video is going to change the course of the election by itself. It's not enough.
Okay. What about on the opposite end, where you have former President Donald Trump accusing Kamala Harris of using AI to increase the appearance of an audience at one of her rallies?
Yeah. I mean, it's patently absurd. I don't know how else to describe it, because there's all sorts of...
I mean, there's plenty of people who would say no.
It's not that it's literally impossible to do. That can't be the case. It's that there's so many methods of verifying that the crowd was what it was. So you have single news organizations with multiple lenses, right? Multiple angles of the crowd. Then you have competing organizations also with very similar news shots. So you would have to think that there's a massive conspiracy among all these news organizations that were present at the events, and that they fooled everyone, or that they had everyone in on it, or they didn't tell anyone and they just released the video and nobody spoke up about it. So it requires a tremendous amount of orchestration to pull that off across, CNN, New York Times, the Washington Post, MSNBC, even Fox, right? You have to get all of them to say, oh yeah, we're gonna show an altered feed.
This is the first election where artificial intelligence will have a presence. I had the great opportunity to participate in a test with several of the chatbots. I was able to ask them questions related to Nevada elections, and it was really concerning. I'm not concerned, yes, I'm concerned about deepfakes and the information we actually see in real time, but we have an ability to respond to those situations and to deal with them. It's the information being given by the chatbots and AI that we don't know is being given. For example, we know that young people are more likely to adopt that technology than others. And if they're a first-time voter, they may ask, when do I need to register to vote? And the information the chatbot gave was 3 weeks in advance of the election, which is wrong. In Nevada, we have same-day voter registration, which means we just turned away a potential young voter from participating. That's a big issue because we don't know it's occurring, we don't know how often it's occurring, and the youth vote could be a strong determinator in who the President of the United States is, because our margins are so slim. And if a certain number of people are using this as information, they're not going to participate.
Okay, so can you simply explain what a chatbot is and then your reaction to what he has experienced?
Yeah, sure. So a chatbot is most of our viewers probably have interacted with the chatbot in some way. They've been online and some little pop-up box says, "Can I help you?" And it's not a person, it's a computer program, it's a piece of software. And you say, yeah, I want to return my item, or how long is the refund policy? And you just interact with it. You talk to it like you would a person.
A lot of government institutions are utilizing
Sure,
these.
Yeah, right. Now, there's two different ways, or there's, broadly speaking, two different ways of doing a chatbot. There's called the old school and the new school way. The new school way is using like a ChatGPT. So this is large language model. It's ChatGPT. There's another company called Anthropic that has Claude. Google has, did they still call it Bard? No, now they call it Gemini. So there's all these large language models. This is the most cutting edge large language model chatbot technology. That stuff So that's in one bucket. One thing that's important about that bucket is that it's well known for generating what gets called hallucinations, or some people call confabulations. In short, it just outputs false information. So if it doesn't know the answer, it'll just make it up. Some people call it, it's a BS machine. So
oh my.
It's it doesn't just say, oh, here's the answer. It does so confidently in many cases. So that's large language models, and they can be used as chatbots, but the danger is that they can output false information. So-called old school chatbots, what I'm calling old school chatbots, they don't have that kind of flexibility. If you like pre-program it with the questions and answers. And so it can't go off the rails because it's just on very specific rails. If you say, when is election day, if it's not programmed to say it's on this day, then it won't say it. If it says it's on this day, it'll say that day. So it's very clear cut. It can say this, it cannot say that. If you're using a large language model of that, the first bucket variety, and there's crucial information like when's election day, when do I have to register by, whatever it is, that's dangerous. That seems on the face of it quite dangerous because it can hallucinate, it can make up false information, and then you have people misguided, not through any fault of their own, and then they don't wind up voting, or they vote for people that they didn't want to vote for because they falsely believed what the beliefs of the person were, the policy positions were. If we're talking about an old school chatbot, that's fine. I don't see any reason why you would use a large language model for this kind of case. If it's just purely information about things like when's election day and where can I vote, things like that, there's no reason to use this large language model stuff.
Well, I think the idea is that young people, for example, are going to say, hey, ChatGPT, tell me when the election day is, or when can I register to vote? You're saying that's not that common.
Well, I don't think we have any reason to think that Google has been unseated, right? That if it were the case that young people were flocking to say at ChatGPT, not using Google search and using ChatGPT instead, we'd see a lot more headlines about it. Google would be very worked up about it, and they are worked up about search to some extent. But it's more it's a fear, it's a proactive thing, as opposed to what we're seeing right now is the youth flocking to large language model chatbots to do their search instead of, say, Google or Bing for whoever uses that. So I don't see it as a problem yet. It's a scale issue. Look, might there be some people, young or old, who go to ChatGPT to get information and it turns out to be false information? Yeah, I'd be surprised if that weren't the case. But what's the scale here? If we're talking about, a dozen people, no big deal. If we're talking about 100,000 people, big deal. So I don't think we have a sense of what the scale is of people using large language models to ferret out information of high importance, like how do I vote? But if we do see that, that's a real worry.
And similarly, you can get on Google and find false information.
Exactly, right. Plenty of people will Google stuff, and they'll find fake news websites, they'll find just bad advice, and they'll follow that, and that's a bad idea too.
Earlier I'm sorry.
No, so then just the question is the rate at which people are getting false information from a ChatGPT relevant to election cycle or election requirements? Is it so outpacing the false information that people get, say, from a standard Google search? And I haven't seen any research to indicate that there's a big delta there.
Earlier, you talked about watermarks as a potential regulation. How would that even come to be? Would that be federal legislation? I mean, would there be consequences if it was found? Who would regulate this in the first place?
Nobody really knows. There's not. So there's two things. One is who's going to regulate it, and the short answer is could be federal, probably unlikely, although they're trying to push for it, and there could be state legislatures that do it. So that's plausible that they could pass such a thing. But then there's a technical problem. Can we actually create these watermarks in a way that's reliable? Can we create watermarks that don't get hacked? And we don't have that yet. Researchers are working on this sort of thing. There's also debate: should we be watermarking fake content, or should we be watermarking the true content? So maybe what we do is, instead of trying to figure out what all the fake stuff is and watermarking that, maybe we have like a stamp of approval, a stamp of verification for things that come from, PBS Nevada or the New York Times or CNN or whatever it is. So let's try to watermark the stuff that we have verified the source of, as opposed to watermarking the stuff that we can't verify the source of. So there's also this sort of strategic debate about which way should we go. And that is in part a technical question.
Where would you start in regulating AI?
Oh man, where would I start in regulating AI? So the way that I like to think about it is there are some things that are illegal and some things that are unethical. And a lot of stuff is already illegal. So discriminating against people of color, for instance, is illegal. There's questions about how to take anti-discrimination law and apply it to cases in which AI may discriminate against people, as an example. But at least there's strong foundation for, here's the foundation of anti-discrimination law, here's how it should or does apply to AI now. Some of that stuff is, and then you have some things that are unethical but not illegal. And then you have some things that are unethical but we don't want to regulate against. I know this is sort of a long answer, but we have some things that are unethical that you don't want to regulate against. So for instance, it's unethical to cheat on your spouse, let's say, right? But we don't want it to be illegal. That'd be too much government power to put people in jail or impose fines on people for cheating on their spouses, though it is unethical. So when I hear the question, something like, how do you want to regulate AI? The thing that comes to my mind is, okay, so what are the things that are already not illegal? Notice that fraud is illegal already, right? So if you're conducting fraud or discrimination by AI, that's likely going to be illegal as it is. So what are the things that are unethical with AI, that are not currently illegal, that should be legal?
Should be legal or illegal?
Sorry, you're right. So it should be illegal. What are those things that should be illegal that are not already?
Okay.
And it can't just be that, well, this is unethical, so it should be illegal. That's not the case.
Right.
And so that's a really hard question to answer, and it's not clear. My general stance towards regulation probably has evolved since the last time we spoke a year ago, which is that I think we're jumping a little bit too quickly into most regulation. I'd like to see more, let's take the law that we have now and see how it applies, like anti-discrimination law. There's lots of speculation by various parties about what the capabilities of AI are, what people are going to do with it, and we don't have a ton of evidence about what are the actually bad things that are going down. We have fear, but not a lot of good evidence of here's all the bad stuff that's going on right now that's having really bad impacts. And in the presence of that fear and in the presence of that ignorance, that's a bad place to start creating wise regulations from.
Reid Blackman, maybe we'll have you back next year and see how much has changed.
Sounds good.
Thank you for joining Nevada
Thanks for
Week.
having me.